for those of you who are just joining us, please pass the word around and give us some feedback on what you like and what we could do better. But we're very excited today to have Greg Kretzinger from Parrot. And Parrot is one of the leaders in small UAS and some other related technologies, doing some very interesting things. And Greg and I actually met at a symposium up in Alaska probably 2 years ago, and we struck up a conversation regarding the use of UAS in STEM education. And it was just fortuitous that I bumped into him at a conference at Drone World down in the Bay Area a couple, 3 months ago. And we're both very passionate about this. Greg's official title is Scientific Program Director for Parrot, but we all have the use of unmanned aircraft and drones in STEM education is near and dear to our hearts. So I don't want to waste any more time. Greg's got a very interesting perspective on the industry, where it's going, and how that pertains to STEM education and preparing kids for the future. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Greg?
All right, thanks a lot, John. So I'm going to focus mostly on the small UAS market. That's really where Parrot is focused, and less so on kind of the larger platforms. John will talk a little bit about that at the end. So let me just kind of introduce myself and the company and go from there. Let's see here if we can. See, Tom, oh, there we go. So my background is in the sciences, so I'm trained as an ecologist. I did my PhD in ecology, and then I was an academic for a couple of years. I was a tenure track professor, and then I got excited about drones and dropped out of academia and joined the private sector. So it can be done, and I highly encourage folks to take that chance. If you are sick of grading and want to join the drone industry, it's a fun and wild place to be. So this is my former life as an ecologist, and I got excited about drones really for collecting data, and I saw pretty quickly that drones would change how we collect field data, particularly time series spatial data, and that's really important to the sciences as well as lots of other applications. And so that's what got me excited about the space, and a big part of my role at Parrot is helping scientists as well as academics and other educators learn about drones, incorporate drones into their teaching, and really drone data applications. So just a quick overview about Parrot. I won't talk too much about the company. This is our founder and CEO. This is Henry Sado. And Henry is kind of a mad genius when it comes to inventing, particularly around drones, and he built Parrot around just kind of his ideas around connected devices. And so Parrot early on, let's see, John, I'm going to have you control the slides here. Or Tom, I'm going to have you control the slides. If you just fast forward one.
Hang on a second, I just have to take that back. Hold on.
Okay.
It'll just take me a second to do that. Hang on. Oh. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so Parrot, that's okay. It wasn't advancing so quickly for me. Parrot is based in Paris, France, and so we have a staff of about 1,000 worldwide, and I'm based in the San Francisco office of Parrot, so I deal with North America, but a lot of our products worldwide, so I talk to an international contingent. If you advance one. Yeah, so Parrot is really based around connected devices, and we started in the early 90s with automotive, so we did some of the earliest Bluetooth devices. From there we went on to different connected objects, and so we sell everything from headphones, we still do car Bluetooth, and some OEM stuff in Detroit around automotive, and then drones. If you move forward one. And so Parrot actually was one of the original creators of the off-the-market kind of consumer drones. That was the AR drone, which you might recognize here. That came out in 2010, and that was really the first off-the-shelf drone platform that's out there. And so you could take your phone and you could fly it with your phone or with a controller, and so it still fit within Parrot's kind of connected devices. But it was really to gamify phones and kind of video games, but to create kind of a fun toy and a great user experience. You can move forward. From there, advance one, Tom. And really, what Henry wanted to do, our CEO, was really get kids, particularly his kids, off their phones and outside and really experiencing life, but still have them kind of connected to their devices, which they love so much. And you as educators know that kids love their phones. But using these phones for more real-world experiences. And so that was the idea behind the AR drone. And what led to its resounding success and really the launch of the consumer drone industry and where we're at today. It all started with that AR drone. All right, advance. So today Parrot really has a range of different products, and they run from toys to more of the prosumer in the middle there, and then professional level platforms. And so we approach the drone space on a lot of different levels, but really you can think of Parrot as a pipeline in the educational space. So starting with toys that can be programmed that are great for STEM and very safe, to more prosumer platforms that can be used for videography or mapping or different drone kind of entry-level applications for students, all the way up to professional level geospatial tools, so more for the academic research community. We can advance one. So we also have a software development platform on all our drones. So if one of the aspects of today's webinar is really that drones are just as much about the software and the programming and autonomy as they are about the hardware. And as we move forward in the future, these drone software side of things will become the bigger opportunities in the space. We can advance one. So we also are the parent company of a couple of different professional level drone platforms, drone companies, including Pix4D for stitching, SenseFly, which builds planes, MicaSense, which is about multispectral cameras, and Aeronav in France, which is about precision ag. So this consortium is helping Parrot move from just kind of a consumer toy company into a professional drone space as we launch the commercial drone industry. You can advance. So I'd like to just briefly run through where we are now and why drones are such a big deal. So it really all started in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone. You can move forward. The iPhone really created low-cost sensors, including GPSs, gyroscopes, accelerometers, that allowed us to take hardware, in this case a drone, and know where we were at on Earth and where we were at in an X, Y, and Z plane. And so the readily available parts really launched the drone industry from 2007 into kind of 2009, 2010. You can advance. So 2009, and you can advance again. You're really talking about kits. A drone was really a bucket of parts that you would get, and you would sit in your garage and solder it together. And then you would have some, a very basic autopilot that could be programmed. And then, you would connect that to motors and hope that this thing flew. 2010, we came out with the AR drone, so it was a fairly quick advancement, but most of the space was still kind of around the bucket of parts. You can advance too. Right, so 2011, 2012, we moved with off-the-shelf autopilots. So rather than a bucket of parts, you had an off-the-shelf autopilot that could be plugged into different components. 2012, you started to see other kits come out, like by 3D Robotics and some of the open source community, really for building your own kind of off-the-shelf platform that flew pretty well and could also be programmed. You can advance. 2013, 2014, the market started changing, and so people didn't really want to build their own drones. They wanted things that flew off the shelf, just kind of like in the computer industry. People started with building their own computers, and now today you just take something off the shelf and you want it to work. That came very quickly in the drone space. You had DJI coming in with the Phantom series, 3DR launched the Iris. You can advance. 2014, we saw Parrot launch the Bebop. You can advance. And then 2015, you really saw the launch of pretty sophisticated platforms like the 3DR Solo as well as DJI Inspire. The interesting thing about both these platforms is that they're really connected to the web and to the Internet of Things. So you have a phone with an app connected to a controller, connected to the drone, and back to the phone and to the Internet. And that connection really expands the applications of drones from just kind of flying remote-controlled devices that could fly autonomous missions to really flying smartphones that can collect data. You can advance. So the market really from 2014, 2015 into 2016 was really about getting the shot. It was really a drone as a flying camera, basically, for capturing great video and great cinema. And so the market has been purely, mostly a consumer play about focused at folks that want to get a new aerial perspective and for storytelling. And so that's really been the main driving factor of the explosion of drones in the consumer space. And that's really $1 billion industry, right, is about getting beautiful photographs and beautiful video. You can advance. At the same time, the market has started looking at these off-the-shelf consumer or prosumer level platforms that are in the $1,000 to $3,000 range, and wondering, hey, these things, even though they're sold as kind of toys or flying GoPros or flying cameras, they compare fairly well to some of these very expensive platforms. So why should I spend $30,000 on a platform when I can spend $2 or $3 and get the same kind of data out of it? You can advance. As well as the autonomous missions that these drones can do, they can fly a pre-programmed route like shown here, where they're flying kind of a lawnmower pattern, and each of those red dots would be a picture that you can program the drone to capture, and you can use these for mapping. We can stitch all those pictures together. And so the commercial applications here are huge, obviously, not just in agriculture, which is pictured here, but in lots of different aerial surveying and GIS, the GIS world. You can advance. But 2014, 2015 or so, as the explosion was occurring, we still were really limited by the FAA rules. So you needed the manned aircraft license or a 333 or a COA, depending on what organization you were with or what agency. So that really hindered folks from going out and using these commercially. That includes the educational and the research space that flew under commercial applications, since you're getting paid to teach or do research. And so that was a huge hindrance in the development of small unmanned systems for the commercial market. You can advance. So moving forward, you can advance one more. I want to talk a little bit about Solo. You can advance. So 2015 into 2016, launch of Solo saw the first drone in a big box store. This was Solo entering into Best Buy. Before that, no other consumer platform or drone had entered really a big box retailer. And what that did was expand the audience of drones and really, I think, did a lot to normalize the use of drones in an everyday business. You can go, or everyday use for the general public. And so you can go into a Best Buy and see a drone there right next to your speakers or your phones or your tablets or whatever else you need to buy. You can advance. Since then, we've seen a proliferation, though, of all the other retailers really following after the Solo. So you have huge, you had Unique and DJI and some of the other platforms coming into these big box stores. You can advance. And since then, we've seen really a proliferation of drones, mostly from toy companies based out of Shenzhen and in China that does a lot of the manufacturing. So just a huge range of different platforms of varying quality and safety and flight times, and you know, just really an explosion of people trying to cash in on this industry. It's also muddled the industry to say, okay, as an educator, you know, what should I buy and what's a good platform? There's so many of them and in such a range of costs. So it's really kind of muddled the market, and it made it more difficult to navigate. Okay, you can advance. So 2016 into 2017, you'll see drones starting to get smarter. So DJI Phantom 4 came out with cameras in the front and in the back. You have the Unique using Intel's RealSense for sense and avoid. Our platforms, we just launched the Slam Dunk, which is used for running SLAM, for obstacle avoidance. There's a lot of different hardware coming out to help make drones smarter. And I think as you move from throughout 2017, 2018, 2019, you'll see off-the-shelf platforms getting pretty smart when it comes to avoiding obstacles and not running into things. There's still some challenges when it comes to things like power lines or twigs or whatnot, but I think you're going to start to see drones become a lot safer and a lot easier to use. Okay, move forward. One more. Okay, right now also within the space you're seeing kind of a bloody battle to the bottom when it comes to pricing. So DJI in particular has been pretty tough in marking their pricing down and taking a hit in order to force out a lot of the competition from the market. So in the consumer space, there's really 2016 was a pretty tough year, and 2017 likely will be as well in the consumer market. So the big box stores. So we've seen a lot of drone companies going out of business. For example, Lilly just fired all their staff. 3DR's pivoted mostly to software. GoPro has had their own problems with Karma, etc. So I think you're going to see with this bottoming out of the market, a lot of a few of the big players remaining, and still more startups coming in trying to play in this space. You can advance. Okay, so where are we now? So consumer platforms are off the shelf is getting good and is good right now and getting really great. And so you don't really need to build a drone if you just need a flying camera. You can go and get one today, and it's going to work a lot better than one that you can build yourself. It's still mostly a consumer market. It's about getting the shot still, but we're starting to see more commercial applications that are about getting the data. It's a brutal race to the bottom on price. So you can buy a really nice platform for a couple $100 now, $399, $499. You can get something that's incredibly powerful compared to even just a few years ago. You see some plug-and-play sensors, and by this I mean hot swappable cameras, but that has yet to take over the market. It's still mostly a fixed camera, or you have one or two camera options. I think we'll start to see that change over time. Software is yet to overtake hardware in the drone space, and by that I mean for the most part it's still folks like DJI and Parrot making drone hardware that are really making the money. But the future is really not about the hardware, just like with the iPhone or an Android phone. It's really about the apps that you can develop and put on top of that. That includes in the teaching space. And so we have yet to see great teaching apps come out for STEM education, for example. You're starting to see some. We work with partners like Tinker for drone block programming for kids on some of our lower-end platforms like the Parrot Mambo, but you've yet to see really leaders in the educational software space. You can move forward. Okay, so what's the future? One more, Tom. So it's really the pivot from consumer to commercial. So it's the move from getting the shot to the data side of things. One more. So the rules now are out, right? So we have the federal, the FAA has come out with the education rules. That was in May. It's clarifying what educators as well as student use of drones. We have Part 107 that came out, making it much easier and much lower bar to start teaching or doing research with drones as well as drones for commercial use. So 2017 into 2018, we're going to see an explosion in the drone space in a good way that is really about drones for use in commercial businesses as well as education as that pipeline to the commercial space. You can move forward. So it's now about the data. It's about using these for drone applications, and that's what I'll spend the rest of the talk talking about. And really the focus here is to say, as educators, if you want to prepare students for the drone industry, this is where I see the biggest opportunities. This is not to say that building with kits and things like that aren't of value, particularly for STEM and teaching engineering, but if you want to go into the drone industry per se, like this is where I see the value add in the near term. All right, next slide. Okay, the future of drones is really about making them safer and smarter. That's kind of what I talked about, but that's really around autonomy. So teaching about autonomy and learning about autonomy, computer vision, etc. That's really a major focus of the drone space moving forward, and that's primarily about software. Next slide. We'll start to see hot swappable payloads, and so that's not just a color camera. You want a multispectral camera like we saw the Parrot Sequoia camera. That's a GoPro size camera for mapping plants. You'll start to see thermal cameras that are more readily available. So the drone is just a flying platform, and then it's really about the sensors and the software that you can overlay on that platform. Next slide. So you'll start to see primarily in the commercial space the main interest in the near term, the main applications are really high resolution color cameras. You're going to see thermal cameras for civil applications like police or firefighting or inspection. You'll start to see multispectral cameras like Sequoia that's there, the red camera, that's more for plant mapping, so that's agriculture, environmental surveys, ecological applications, forestry. And then LiDAR, so LiDAR for laser scanning, say of buildings or high-end construction projects. Next slide. The future of drones, as I see it, is really about custom software apps for more specific needs. So taking the applications, so similar to an iPhone, you don't want to be in the iPhone business, you want to be in the app business because it's more about taking those data that the sensors collect and targeting very specific commercial needs with those applications. Next slide. I think one of the biggest opportunities is really augmented reality. So you saw this a lot if you're teachers. You saw this a lot with Pokemon Go. So using your phone to augment reality. In this case, it was a treasure hunt, capturing little dinosaurs. But in the drone space, it's really about overlaying data on top of the reality that a drone sees. So that could be overlaying a geofence, that could be overlaying notes on top of that for teaching. It could be peeling away data layers in real time, so you're seeing a forest, but you could peel away and see the soil type underneath. Or augmented reality for training, so gamifying drones so you can learn to fly them. So you see on the screen what the drone's seeing, but you have to fly through some rings or go collect some coins or something like that that helps with training flight skills. So taking the reality you see and amplifying it with on the screen, I think you'll see a lot more of that as we move forward, particularly in drone racing. I think that's a big advancement. Next slide. I think a lot of the future of small drones also, particularly in the consumer space and in the teaching space, will be the use of 360 cameras moving forward, so virtual reality. So you can mount a 360 camera and then students can use their phone, slide it into some very low-end goggles like a Google Cardboard, and then they can be in that space in 360 degrees. So they can be out and seeing different ecosystem types, for example, or seeing different archaeological sites, or just amazing applications that drone data combined with 360-degree data will open up. And that's not to say that students shouldn't get outside and experience those things. They obviously can and should, and that's an important part of education. But in a rainy day in Oregon, it would be great if they could slide on Google Cardboard and be exploring the drone shots of famous canyons or beautiful architecture. So I think that's an amazing teaching opportunity, and that's not just limited to drones. That's 360 cameras in general. Next slide. Okay, so the future of drones is really also about cloud data management. And so if you go to the next slide, so the data that are coming in from these vehicles is pretty tremendous, both just in the type and quality of data, as well as the size of these files and how you're going to manage all the data. So here's Sequoia. Sequoia triggers different spectral bands as well as a color camera. So every time that camera triggers, you're getting 5 different photos out. And those photos are then stitched together into maps. So here's a forestry site. So there's a lot of forestry going on in Oregon. So I picked this application. So if you click to the next slide, I can fly in and about, so you saw the Google Maps behind it, but this is a map that I created that's more recent, and this took me about 9 minutes to collect. It's about 20 acres or so, and what you can see is a clear cut next to an intact forest. It's second growth forest with some roads coming through. You can see the grading marks of the cats that came through and took out the trees. So that's the color photograph. Next slide. But we can flip through, next slide, and look at different multispectral aspects. So here's NDVI, the vegetation indices, so how much light is being reflected off the plants versus how much is being absorbed. Gives you a kind of a heat map of productivity. Next slide. You can, I can get you terrain models, right? So this is a digital elevation model, so I can get these data in 3 dimensions. So if we wanted to build a different road in there, we can use that. And look at the grade of the land. Next slide. So all of those data, you know, that's a couple of gigs of data collected in about 9 minutes that cover only about 20 acres or so in that particular flight. I could have collected more. But let's say we were managing teams of drones or lots of drones for different teams all over the world, all mounted with Sequoia, flying multiple missions across different days and for different study sites, etc. So how do I manage terabytes of data across different clients, personnel, locations, time, etc.? Same thing with academics. And so if I'm teaching with students or I'm trying to teach a photogrammetry class, how do I manage all the data across students? And that's multispectral data, thermal data, color data, etc. Keeping all of that straight is an enormous task as well as an enormous opportunity for the commercial space. So I think you'll start to see a lot of advancement in how we manage the jobs and how we present them in very tangible ways. We're really in a big data problem and data overload that we've seen in other industries like telecommunication. Next slide. So the way that I think about drones in the job that I do is really the drone. It's about drone to phone to cloud and back again. So that's the way that I think about the space and the workflow. Next slide. And to me, it's really about the data and not the drone. The drone, we're going to sort out the drones and the flying part. And for me, you know, I just want the drone to fly and do an autonomous mission and map and get me the data, and I just need it to be correct. And then for me, then it's about, the job is about managing the data. Same thing in the drone industry. If you're an assurance adjuster, you don't care about flying. You want the thing to fly itself, and they're getting much better at that. You want high quality data so that you can, you know, file an insurance claim faster, for example, or you know, go monitor the slope on a hillside for erosion much more quickly. So it's really about the data, not the drone. Next slide. Okay, so here's just a little bit of advice for preparing the next generation. That's what that slide should say. It's a little bit off. So in my biased opinion, as part of Parrot inside the drone industry, I really feel like drones are really about software. It's about apps, autonomy, computer vision over hardware. At Parrot, we probably hire 10 software engineers for every 1 hardware engineer. And we're always desperately looking for folks that know about autonomy, about computer vision, about programming, about developing apps for iOS or Android. And that's the same across a lot of these different companies. And so if you want to prepare students for the drone industry specifically, I think software is really the way to go if for the most jobs. Next, within the commercial space, drone applications are even bigger than, say, working for a drone company. So it's really about data collection and management. It's about understanding, it's much easier for me to teach a GIS person how to fly a drone. That takes about 20 minutes in an iPad than it does for them to understand the data layers or manage GIS software or to learn about change detection for a particular application. So if you can teach students about GIS and mapping and data layers, I think that's where most of the jobs will come in, whether you're working for AT&T or some other company, or whether you're working for Oregon Department of Fish and Game, or whether you're working for a real estate agent or a construction site. It's really about mapping in 2 and 3D and managing those different data layers. So a lot of folks want to build drones, and that was really popular early in the drone industry, as in 2 years ago, particularly with the early adopters, and they still would argue that, you know, you got to build it yourself. But I would say that most of the drone operators today are using off-the-shelf platforms, and if you look at the data, it's really the main leaders right now are DJI with the Inspire and the Phantom 4. Our platform of SenseFly is leading on the fixed-wing side for mapping, and then it follows kind of down with a lot of other kind of applications in there. And then I'll just say that the drone industry is moving very quickly, and it's hard to keep up with, even for us that are in it. So, you know, if you're building these programs, I would plan to move quickly in terms of just plan for fluidity. Particularly in the software and in the hardware. Know that this hardware is going to get better over time, and so, you know, you're going to have to try to plan to keep up, and that means getting, you know, not blowing all the funding in the first go around, or planning to apply for different funding for renewal. It's not like computers where you're going to buy it and it's going to last for a couple of years. You know, drones might last for 1 or 2 years in terms of the cutting edge technology. And so it's really, you have to decide within your educational programs, what are your main goals of your program, and how do you build a pivot into your program in terms of keeping up with it. And next slide. So we do have an educational program with Parrot, so we offer discounts on our hardware. If you're in the K through 12 space, particularly K through 8, I would check out our toys, particularly our Mambo platform. That's a little quad that flies indoor. Parrot is a leader in toys because they put a little sonar and an optical flow camera on these platforms. And so they're super stable compared to some of the other toys that you might buy. They're really nice for teaching, particularly if you get the FlyPad, the little Bluetooth controller, for $100 for the drone and like $20 for the controller or whatever it is. We have teaching bundles. They're really nice. They feel just like you're flying a larger platform, and they're super safe for kids. You can also program them, so you can use Tinker or some of the other block programming. They're similar to Scratch if you're using Scratch for programming. You just drag the blocks over and press play, and the drone will take off and turn 90 degrees and move forward for 3 seconds, etc. From there, you can move up to Bebop, and then we have Disco, which is a really great fixed-wing teaching platform. All those can be used. Disco or Bebop can be used for mapping. We integrate with Pix4D for stitching, and so on. So we're really trying to build a pipeline from the K through 12 all the way up to the professional space, and we'll work on doing that with curriculum partners and other partners out there. You can get a hold of me at gregory.krutzinger@parrot.com. I encourage you to look at edu.parrot.com, which is our educational space. We outline a lot of the offerings that we have, and you know, we're happy to support the educational community. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Greg. And while I'm switching over, John Stevens is going to share a little bit, be giving a little bit different perspective. There's a questions section. You should be able to get, you should have a drop-down menu or something on your screen. You can enter questions into the questions box. So far I don't have any questions, so I'm hoping there will be some somewhere along the line. And we'll address those at the end of John's presentation. So give me a second here, and we'll just move out, hopefully. Trying to move away from this. Take me a second to do this. Okay. Okay, John, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Tom. If you want to drive, that's great.
Okay. And you let me know when you want.
Yeah, let's just kick it off. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. Again, thanks, Greg. That was great. And the perspective on SUAS is unique and appreciated, and the transition to it's about the data certainly in a lot of respects jives with what we view in terms of the value chain and the value stream here. When we take a look at the drone industry at SOAR, we take a really vertically integrated view of it all the way from the unmanned aircraft down to that end user at the end of that data stream that is really looking for actionable information. One of the perspectives that we have as well that I think is really complementary to the smalls, and it's kind of evolutionary as well, is when we start getting into larger platforms and the utility of larger platforms. And again, for the educational community, what are we trying to create in terms of our workforce, our students, to be able to support not only the small drone industry, but also larger platforms. Greg mentioned that Part 107 and the SUAS rules apply to drones that are below 55 pounds. Well, there is an entirely different market for those platforms, the larger platforms, that drives a set of skill requirements that goes much more broadly and kind of frankly, into the aerospace and aviation domain, which has existed historically in terms of skill sets required to do that. So, Tom, next slide, please. So I have to put in our shameless self-promotion here for SOAR. Tom, next couple of bullets, please. Just go ahead on through it. So what does SOAR do? Again, I mentioned that we already support business development and the UAS industry within the state. We have a marketing support and outreach program that supports industries as well as our 3 test ranges. The next bullet, we do have 3 FAA-designated test ranges here in Oregon as part of the Pan-Pacific UAS Test Range Complex at Tillamook, Warm Springs, and at Pendleton, which offer us a great capability to attract and engage with industry here in the state. And then we have this outreach component, which is why I'm here, and we take this very seriously. We're delighted to participate in this initiative with OSU and with the Oregon Department of Education to begin to see how we can better integrate unmanned aircraft systems and drones into educational programs. Next slide. So really, what are we talking about in terms of the need? Well, and this is still somewhat relevant. These numbers do change, but just in the state of Oregon, projection back in 2013 was by 2025 we would need another 1,100 jobs within the state of Oregon to support the UAS industry. And this historically has happened in tech clusters like Hood River with companies that spun off of In-Situ, CloudCap, SageTech, some of the other companies, and now we're actually seeing a second generation of spin-offs coming off of those companies up in Hood River. Some really unique technologies, and it's still a growing industry, and Oregon has really become kind of a hotbed of that activity. So there's tremendous economic potential there, and again, that's kind of what we do. That's what SOAR does, and we want to continue to further that economic potential. Next slide. This is actually from a Goldman Sachs report that just came out, I think, about a year ago to identify the top 5 UAS markets. And it was a dramatic shift in the prognostications of what type of applications are really relevant for unmanned aircraft. And it is, obviously, it's based in time. It's a snapshot in time. And this will probably change over time. We'll see other applications that will wax and wane in terms of their importance to economic contribution. But I think, as Greg mentioned, industrial inspection is huge. The ability to use a small UAS to go out and take a look at some of the critical infrastructure and do it safely without putting human beings in harm's way, having them climbing towers or inspecting bridges or what have you, has become quite an active market segment. We're still very gung-ho about agriculture, particularly in central and eastern Oregon, and resource-based applications for drones. Insurance, Greg mentioned that as well, being able to quickly assess damage, accident sites, and not surprisingly, because we see a lot of this out there, is aerial photography and real estate. So the markets are shifting, and they will continue to shift as we see more and more capabilities fielded as the FAA continues to bless us with their regulatory environment as that begins to roll out. Next slide. So I already mentioned this. I kind of stole my own thunder here. We typically think about drones, particularly in the consumer and prosumer segment, as those little guys, which are under 55 pounds. The question remains, and it is still a question, but what about larger UAS, and specifically those larger UAS being applied in the civil and commercial applications? They are, without question, they are more complex, they are higher risk, and they are certainly more expensive. So, for example, if I take a look at some of the larger platforms that are being considered, that are on the books or being thought of for different commercial applications, these are platforms that definitely tip the scales, at least in the eyes of regulators and those of us who've been in the aerospace industry for years, into a category of drones that, or unmanned aircraft, that really do require significant levels of reliability, of safety, again, because these are sharing the airspace with large manned platforms at those altitudes where there is a lot of traffic and the potential for things to need to get out of the way of other things. And also simply because they are viewed, and even in the FAA's eyes, they are viewed as high kinetic and high energy vehicles that need to be appropriately certified and managed. And so I talk about this a lot in my discussions. I talk about FAA certification, really what that means. Every jetliner, every GA aircraft that you get on in the National Aerospace System right now is a certified system. It may be experimental, but in that case it's not being used commercially. So the FAA goes through great lengths to ensure that our National Aerospace System and those aircraft that are flying in it are safe, and FAA certification is part of that process. But that leads into a lot of technologies, a lot of redundancy, and frankly a lot of talent and skill going into designing, manufacturing, fielding, supporting these larger UAS. And again, this is still a huge sector within the U.S. The U.S. does have a commanding presence across the globe in larger unmanned aircraft systems. A lot of these have their origins in military platforms, obviously, but that's a natural migration of technology. We saw it in the internet, we've seen it in other technologies, where very quickly it begins to migrate into the civil and commercial applications, and we're going to see more of that in large UAS. Next slide. So what's the future? A very, very interesting rendition here from a company called ACube, which is actually a subsidiary of Airbus, for a project that SOAR is working with. It's called Vahana, and in essence this is a personalized air taxi that picks you up, takes you in a very safe and autonomously fashion to where you need to go, and drops you off. This is a real project, and again, we're delighted to support it, but I'm sure you can imagine some of the technologies that go into such a platform to make it safe, to make it reliable, and it's the future of large semi-autonomous aircraft that are going to be occupying the National Airspace System. So I throw this out there just to stimulate the thought processes, and what would you see as educators as the requirements to generate and develop the next workforce to be able to design, manufacture, field, support, and maintain those type of platforms. It's a really, really interesting future, and we're entering into it right now. Next slide. I love to throw this chart out. It is an eye chart, and I encourage you all to, as you download this and are able to access this presentation, take a look at some of these positions, these different job categories that might apply. There's a tremendous amount of cross-pollination going on between manned aircraft and the unmanned communities right now, and it seems to be growing every day. And it's a natural evolution. Again, if there's a technology that works well in manned aviation that can be applied to unmanned aircraft, and so be it. And likewise, the converse is also true. Greg mentioned a little bit about things like detect and avoid, the ability of an aircraft to autonomously detect an obstacle and then also autonomously select a course of action to avoid that object. Those technologies have tremendous application, cross-pollination between unmanned and manned aviation. Again, the takeaway is that a lot of these skill sets and a lot of these jobs that I've listed here work very well in the unmanned sector as well as they work in the manned sector, particularly, again, when we begin to talk about larger systems and larger platforms. Next slide. So how are we working this right now? And again, thanks to everybody for attending these webinars. We're really looking forward to continuing this series. We think it's vitally important that we create this infrastructure and this support network for STEM educators who are interested in integrating drones and UAS into their curriculum. We formed this consortium, and we're moving out, again, OSU ODE and AUVSI and others. AUVSI Cascades chapter just hosted a STEM event last October, I believe it was, where we, at the same time we did our first webinar. We want to try to leverage these FAA-designated test ranges where we can to see if there's a place, to see if there's a fit for using the test ranges and beginning to rub elbows with these larger platforms and other platforms that are being developed, test ranges, to see where those intersections are between the educational community. And again, obviously, we're working on positioning Oregon education system for the drone industry. We're very excited about it. Next slide. So what are we doing to move forward? Again, more specifically, we are going to conduct yet another industry webinar at the end of February, and we're delighted that we have a commitment from Institute to participate in that particular webinar. We'll get another focus from certainly one of the key leaders in the UAS industry worldwide. We have a March webinar in the planning phases right now, which will be focused on research. And again, we're focusing on K-12. We see the community colleges also as a vital element of these webinars, and we see also their participation in the drone industry. We see it all the time, as a matter of fact. I think Tom already mentioned the STEM Professional Development Summer Institute. That's a mouthful for saying that we're going to host a week-long seminar courtesy of OSU in Corvallis in June of this summer of this year, and it should be a very informative and instructive event for those who are able to participate. And again, we are looking to expand this relationship between the educational communities and industry, and I think this is the first step. Greg, thank you so much for participating. And also, if anybody listening to these webinars has points of contact or individuals in the industry or again, are related to the industry who would like to reach out to SOAR and expand their involvement in this particular program, we'd love to talk. Next slide. Why are we doing this? I got this photo some time ago, and I'm not even really sure. I think it actually came from a newspaper somewhere in the Midwest. And all I've got to do is think about the kind of legacy that we're leaving right now with this industry and injecting this industry into K-12 and the STEM programs. You know, if we can inspire these kids at this age, get them involved in this technology, use that as a vehicle to keep them inspired and moving ahead into either community colleges or four-year degree programs, whatever's most relevant at the time and most effective for them. We're doing our jobs, and we're very excited about it. We take this very personally at SOAR. And, Tom, thanks for putting this stuff together. I didn't want to spend any more time. We've got about, I think, 10 minutes left for questions, so I hope folks have teed up a few of them. Greg and I are still here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Let me quickly take a look at what questions I have. I know we have some. Let's see if I can detach this thing so I can actually read them. There we go. So we have a question from John Honey. When you say under 55 pounds, is that a 55-pound payload? And I'll just let either John or Greg step in to respond to that.
Sure, I could take that one. So it's all up. So full takeoff weight has to be under 55 pounds, and that's with the associated equipment on board.
Okay. And this one may be more actually with, I know Victor, are you still there, Victor?
Yeah, still here.
Okay. This may actually apply to you. So I have a question from Noel. It says, what type of lessons do you do with OSU students? I work with high school kids with math with drones in Eastern Oregon. So Victor's been quietly listening in, but Victor is at OSU, works with a variety of other folks at OSU, and from, well, primarily the education side, Victor, if I'm not incorrect in saying that. And then another person that's not on right now is Mark Peters, who's working on the research end. Can you talk a little bit, is there anything you can share about what's kinds of things with OSU students they're doing?
Sure. Yeah. Mainly what they're doing right now is a lot of the GIS stuff, so mapping. We obviously do a lot of the research side of things, and that's what our webinar in March is going to be going. So a lot of the undergrads, graduate students using drones to gather data for the different types of research that they're doing, whether that be in agriculture, oceanic sciences. We've flown drones over whales to study them, flying them out in the Arctic. So it's basically, again, like Greg said, the drones are just a platform, and what we're interested is in the data that we can get via the sensors. So we're also looking at developing the different types of sensors to get different signatures from different plants and whatnot, and having the students work on the different sensor technologies, as well as using drones in robotics and looking at swarm technology, where you can program these drones to fly autonomously, but yet talking to each other in groups.
Okay, thank you. And we will have more information on what's going on at OSU. Victor and Mark will be leading the webinar in March. Another question. Are there any current resources to help plan coursework to use the drones in a high school classroom? This is from Wade.
Yeah, so I'll step in there. John, maybe you guys have stuff at SOAR. This is kind of one of my #1 at Parrott. That's one of our #1 requests, really, is for curriculum and curriculum development. There's a lot of materials out there on DIY drones and some of the other chat rooms. There's a big opportunity to develop more of an educational community when it comes around drones. That actually doesn't exist yet. We at Parrott we are building curriculum partnerships with folks that are providing drone curriculum. We have some partnerships with Tinker, Tynker. They do some curriculum, but more for K through 12. We're developing other curriculum for Pix4D, our stitching software, and so that'll be coming out later this year, and that would be good for the high school level to teach them about mapping and data collection. And I will say, you know, we work with hundreds of schools and universities across the country, but for the most part, schools have been pretty slow to adopt the technology, mostly because of fear of regulation. And now those regulations are out, and a lot of folks don't really know. But if you can do off-the-shelf well, like you can teach students just to, you know, fly a drone, program a drone to do an autonomous mission, collect some photos, stitch those photos together in 2 and 3D. All that is very point and click, and you're kind of at the top tier at the moment of time. That's the most low-hanging fruit out there, is just do off-the-shelf well, and then build your program from there.
Thank you. And there are a couple things that people have kind of chimed in. And Noel, for example, mentioned this project in Eastern Oregon, putting together 100 lessons, grade 6 through 12 grade in Malheur ESD. That's part of another project I'm working with. And we are actually working on developing a open source site for materials that are developed by teachers. That site, it will isn't in the next week or so, but should be at least by next school year be able to have some access to that. And that's actually a site that's being built by Amazon, of all places, to share open source things for free open source materials for the teachers to develop. So you'll get information on that. And Brenda, and hi Brenda, I know you can't say anything, you can't talk, but I know Brenda from down in Southern Oregon says dronecurriculum.net, and I'll try to make sure I get these things out to folks. source, and then visit the booth at ACTE, which is the Association for Career and Technical Education, is where she must have seen that. So there's some of that information. And Wesley says, I'm new to the ag program and would like to introduce my students to drones. We focus on animals, building, oceans, etc. What drones would you recommend? Either of you, I think probably this is kind of more in the smalls area, so maybe this is something that Greg could suggest.
Yeah, I think I'm always a fan of starting out pretty simply, and one of the simple ag applications is just inspection. So real-time inspection of fields or animals or fencing or your crops, and that can be done with some pretty off-the-shelf platforms that have a camera that live streams. So like a Bebop 2, which we sell, is a couple $100, and it's weighs less than a pound and flies for about 25 minutes and can be fixed, which is a good part for students in case they land on a rock or something. So just start out flying and inspecting and maybe try and do some basic mapping. Those are good ways to start teaching on the agricultural side, and then work your way up to more complicated imagery and plant indices and things. But it's really good to start simple.
Yeah, I'll say here that OSU in our College of Ag, we have researchers using the Phantom from DJI and also 3DR solo drone for observing cattle out in the range and
yeah, all those platforms are pretty comparable, and around that $500 range. I'd say $500 and $400 to $500, you're going to get pretty comparable video and photos, and I would start there with something that's considered kind of basic, low cost for where we're at in the technology.
I also have a question from John Honey, but it's a very specific one. It's really along the same line, specific recommendations. So rather than spending a lot of time going through where he's going to have to frantically write it down, John, I will forward your question on to Victor and John Stevens and Greg to see what kinds of things. And it's clear to me from ODE's perspective is that we probably need to have some way to be able to share some of these questions out and have that community building so that people can ask those of other folks that are using these using this equipment. So I'm going to kind of pass that one up for the moment, John Honey, but I will get to make sure that you're in touch with the folks that are on this webinar and provide you with information. Another question from Nikki Shira, a lot of folks from the Malheur area here. Greg mentioned they are working with some schools and colleges. What is the cost for use of the mapping and knitting software? Is there an educational discount?
Yeah, so Pix4D offers a free version. It's called Pix4D Discovery. It's not the full version of the software. The software itself can be fairly pricey in terms of an investment. So it runs about $2,000 for 2 different seats. It's a pretty high-end research-grade software. There's a lot of other options out there. And it's great for teaching, and we are coming out with student versions of that as well later this year. That will be pretty affordable, kind of textbook price. It's more for the collegiate level. There's a lot of software platforms out there, though, that you can submit your photos, and they will stitch it for you, and you'll get the maps back, and just pay, a couple dollars for a job or for the acreage. That's a good way to go for teaching. So if you don't want to get too much into the stitching, there's a lot of companies out there that are drone data analytics companies that will just stitch the data and provide the data back to you. That's a nice way to start before you start scaling up to the stitching software.
Okay, and I think probably the last one, because we're really past the time here. There's the last question on this is. When is the Basic Operator Certificate program going to start at OSU? And this is from Alan. And Victor, maybe you can say something about that.
The certificate for the Part 107?
I'm guessing that's what Alan's referring to.
Well, that's what the workshop is this summer. So there is an online course that we're working on currently. I don't know at the time that that's going to be up. But the one for educators, we're looking at doing that in the workshop in the summer.
Okay, thank you. And I'll slip one last one in from Chad, and then we'll end today. Says, do general cameras on drones have the metadata embedded to allow the stitching?
Yeah, so most platforms like DJI or the Parrot will geotag. GoPro cameras like on Solo will not. They don't allow. GoPro didn't open that up. So what Chad's asking is the GPS information. So when I go and click on a JPEG photo and say about this photo, it'll show what's called the EXIF file, but it shows the GPS location on those photos. And you can line those photos up then in the stitching software better if you know where they were taken. You can line them up and make a 2D map or a 3D model. So most of those will tag the EXIF data with the geo reference. Happy to chat with you more about that offline.
Okay, thank you. And we'll provide you with contact information for all of our presenters, or some way to ask further questions. Next webinar we have scheduled for February 28th with In Situ. Again, another industry perspective. For those of you who missed it, we are going to expand to 4 instead of 3 in this series. The 4th one will be March 21st. That will be the research perspective. I appreciate everybody's attendance and hope that you got something very valuable out of this particular webinar. Please provide some feedback. We'll send you an email with some of the responses to questions and some additional resources. I have all of your email addresses, and we'll make sure that you also know and can register for the next webinar. Thank you very much, John and Greg, for your presentation, and Victor for the additional information about the education side. And we are past 4:30, so I'll kind of shut down the webinar from this point. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll hopefully see all of you on February 28th. Thank you very much.
Thanks.